there, this is Joffrey's dad again, and this is going to be an update on the seat that we're doing for rescue. As I told you before, we ended up getting a 1988 Chevy bench seat, and we're putting it on the Yukon frame rails. So let's take a look at that. Okay, this is the passenger side rail. It has the two motors in it for raising the back of the seat, the front of the seat, and also the transverse motor that moves this rail forwards and backwards. On the original Yukon, there was a rod like this on this end of the motor, and that had a speedometer cable inside of it that went to the other rail that was about here. Now, when I lengthened the rails out to fit the 88 seat, I was able to take 7/16 rods and put them inside the 1/2-inch pipes that went from one side to the other, so I could extend the driver's track out to where it fit the full-size seat. So what we ended up with was a motor to drive the driver's side and another motor to drive the passenger side. These are hooked together electrically to where they're synchronized, and I've run the tracks back and forth about 30 times, and they seem to stay synced very well to where there isn't any binding in the seat, or it doesn't look like one side is getting ahead of or behind the other. We do have the provision, if necessary, to use that speedometer cable arrangement to go from here over to here and hook the two motors together mechanically as well. But I don't see where we need to do that, and it's just one more thing that would create a problem, as I've talked about with what we had to do with all that. These rods, like I said, I just welded them together. And what we did with the dimensions on this is that this forward hole and this forward hole line up with the outside holes in the truck for the original seat. That keeps the track in the right place on the tunnels that go across for the seat. And what I did was the back holes, I found out when I was doing all that the passenger side is shorter than the driver's side, so I had to add a little piece on to get that to fit into the truck. By doing that, these rails weren't lined up with where the original rails were on the seat. So I put adapter plates on the seat with a stud that I welded into them to attach to the Yukon frame, and another bolt to hold everything nice and straight, both on the back and on the front. Pro tip on those is that these bolts that go into the seat are actually metric. I'm not sure when Chevrolet started making that transition from body parts, but these are metric bolts, and of course all the other bolts that I've played with are SAE bolts. So that's what I did to make the brackets to where the seat was in the middle of the rails, and they fit on the mounts that I made for them into the truck. So that's pretty much the bottom of the seat, and we'll pick up what we did to come up with the idea of running this second motor. Fortunately, this little piece of CVC pipe is the same size as the bars that went across there, because these motors just snap onto into this front rod. So the 1/2-inch pipe was exactly the same diameter, and I was able to just snap the motor onto there and but without the piece going up to the other side to hold everything together, I wanted to make sure that these were the way they were supposed to be. So I cross zip tied them and put a little notch down in here so that this zip tie wouldn't slide off. So that holds the end brackets onto the motor. This holds the motor onto the bar, and then I put a hose clamp on the end of that to where the 1/2-inch pipe can't move. We also have hose clamps on both ends where they go into the worm gear drives, and that holds everything in the place that it's supposed to be, to where the motors don't back out of the drive units that go into the worm gear. And as you can see, transverse works good. We can tip the front of the seat up. We can tip the back of the seat up. And that also transfers over to the other side. Now, normally people stop right there and say we installed that in the truck and everything was good. But I want to go back and show you the circuitous route that it came to ending up that way. Originally, I just had the motor on this side, and this little piece here was still on there. And I tried running a rod from this motor over to this worm gear. Quite honestly, that was with disastrous results, and I'll show you that as we get into the video. The connectors that I made, because I had this little speedometer cable, I cut that in two in the middle to where I had both the square ends, to where I could put that on a 3/16 rod going across to make up the distance from there to there. That didn't work well. I started out with a 3/16 rod and hand filed a square on the end of it, which actually came out very, very nicely. I was very impressed with that. However, when I tried to make a connection to go from a speedometer cable to the 3/16 rod, we ended up with all kinds of trouble. And I'll be back with you in just a second, show you what we did there. I started out with a chunk of 3/8 rod, or 5/8 rod, drilled a hole down through the middle of it that fit the diameter of the speedometer cable, drilled the other end down halfway that fit the 3/16 rod, and then drilled and tapped for set screws to hold the two together. Quite a job to drill a hole straight through a rod that long. So what I ended up with the first time was I broke a tap off trying to tap the hole, so I had to start all over again. Finally got one to where it was the way it was supposed to be, and this is what happened when I tried it. As you can see, that's kind of like a paint shaker. So what I did was to hook up my grinder to where I could come in with that and grind the connector to where it was parallel to the holes. That sort of helped. Ended up with this, which was marginally better, but it still gave me an awful twist on the speedometer cable. I found out while I was playing with it that the speedometer cable was actually getting put on an angle because of the set screw. That was bending the speedometer cable inside the bracket. So I loosened this side up, and what we did was take a 1/4-inch bolt and run it in part way to where I was actually pinching the speedometer cable on both sides. And it was a little bit better, but it still wasn't going to work for a long term. So that's when I decided to go with the other motor and hook them together electrically, and that's what you saw in the first part of the video was the end result of that. So that process took me 3 or 4 days of playing and finding the right parts and doing the drilling and doing the grinding and waiting for the other motor to get from eBay. But now we've got a unit that all I have to do now is to mount the switch, and let me show what we're going to do there. This is the switch that was on the left-hand side of the seat bottom, and that goes into this bracket that actually is the seat base for the Yukon. So I'm going to grind this off, grind that off to where I've just got the mounting bracket for the switch. Get after this plastic and trim that down to where it's just what's for the switch. And then I'm going to mount that either on this metal frame to put it on the side of the seat where it was before, but it would stick out quite a bit, and I don't want to do that because that's where everybody's going to be getting in and out, in and out, in and out. So I think I'm going to hook that up here on the front of the seat from this metal, and let it hang down just a little bit to where it'll be like 2 fingers down still, where there's room between here and the floor, to where you'll work the switch from just to the right of your right knee. That way it'll go back and forward to move forwards and backwards, and the up and down will still be in the right position. So that's the final modification that we're going to do for the seat. When I laid out the seat frame in the truck, the distance from this hole over here to this hole actually lined up, or I lined them up with the outer holes for the original seat frame. So that left enough room for the doors to come in and close, and the bottom of the floor actually tapers quite a bit right after those holes. So that put this on a flat surface. When I came back to the back holes, I had to modify the back rail on the truck in order to do that, and I'll show you that in just a second. Okay, so in here, what I did with this back rail was just cut a piece out of it, take another piece of that 3/16 stock, drill and tap it, and put a bolt in there to where I could hang on to it, stuck it inside the hole, brought it up and then welded around it. And I did it on this side and over on that side to where this hole and that hole line up with the rail that are on the bottom of the seat. So it still gives me quite a bit of room in the little tray here underneath the seat. So I'm very confident that I can put the put the activator switch here by your right knee and still have room for it to go back and forth. So yeah, that's the way the seat came out. Steering column is doing real well. I took a couple of, I bought a zero drop steering mount, and then I, for temporary anyhow, or it may end up permanent, I might just fill in the ends to make it a little prettier. I took 2 chunks of 1-inch square stock, drilled and tapped the one side to where it would fit the steering mount, welded them together on the angle that it had to be in order for it to bolt up to the bottom of the dash, and drilled and tapped those holes to where I could mount that to the dash with 2 holes from the top and mount that to the steering column from the 2 on the bottom. I have tipped the steering column up quite a bit from what was in the original truck. This is the steering column is now up where the shifting rod would go, so I'm making a plate to fill in that hole underneath it, and then I've got a 2-part floor mount from Jegs to hold the bottom of the steering column there. Out in the engine side, this is where it sticks through the floor. The lever here is for the shifter. This little guy right here is to shift the automatic transmission. The rod right here is a 1-inch, what they call double D. That's not a Barbie doll bra size. That's a 1-inch diameter, and when you look at it at the end, it looks like a D on one side and a D on the other side. So that's where they get the 1-inch double D out of it. Put a universal joint on here. This is the original lower steering rod. The one from the Yukon had an expander in here that went to the steering column, but I have a 1-inch double D rod here. Drilled it to where it goes through this connector, dimpled it here for the U-joint on this end, and bolts right up to the steering box that was in the Yukon. So that was probably as simple as you can get. I can still take this bolt out and loosen these up, slide that shaft down to where I don't have to take the steering column out in order to play with the steering system. So very, very pleased with that. The only thing that I found out was that these are really, really tight to go in the U-joints. So I emery clothed that down and then took my high-speed grinder and just cleaned up the surface for this. This went in very easily, and I had to do the same thing down here to get, when they put the nickel plating on this, and I didn't know that I was getting nickel plated when I bought it, but it makes this just like 3/1000ths bigger than what it's supposed to be to go inside the U-joint. So there's a little massaging that has to be done in order to just get the U-joints and the connection together. But with only having the 2 U-joints, you don't have to have a center stay in it, because it's basically just like a drive shaft coming out of a car. You know, unless it's a real long one or has a U-joint in the middle of it, they don't have a steady rest for it. So this is pretty much the same way the factory one is. Moving on, we come up to radiator support. When I started playing with this, It did not have the cross ties on it. It did not have the lower rod in it, which are really, really important for keeping all this square in the front and also keeping the fenders from rattling as it moves from side to side. I went on the build file that has literally everything for 55 to 59, all the way from the 3100s up to the 6000s. It gives all the dimensions and measurements and where to spot weld, and it's the assembly manual for the 55 to 59. A phenomenal wealth of information there. Got into the radiator part, and they showed how this was put together, and this bottom piece here was actually a flat piece where it was tack welded on both ends here, and then they rolled it to make a round bar that went across from one side to the other. So what I did was just take a piece of electrical conduit, heated up both ends of them and smashed them down flat and drilled a hole in them. And then I made up a bracket right here that bolts with these two bolts. Same thing over here on this side, 2 bolts. And this was supposed to be where this cross member was riveted on. So what I did was weld that to my bracket, and then up on the top I also did a bracket and welded the cross tie to the bracket to where if I need to take this thing apart, I still can, because it's not welded here, and here to where you can't get this side off and that side off. I also made sure that I cross-dimensioned from this corner to this corner and from this corner to this corner to make sure that all of this is square, and the dimension from the top bolts on the radiator are exactly the same as the bottom bolts for the radiator. And of course the radiator goes on this side of the radiator support. So these are in front of the radiator, and then when we put the air conditioner in, the condenser, evaporator, whatever the radiator is for the air conditioner will go in front of this and mount with these same bolts that the radiator goes on. We did find with the radiator that I bought for this that the bottom outlet for the radiator, this is the power steering cooler that we'll still be using. That'll come out through here. The lower outlet for the radiator is right in line with the idler arm. Now I'm not going to go through cutting brackets and moving the idler arm and screw up the geometry of the front end. We have plenty of room to just move the radiator up about 1.5 inches and get it above that, and still have room to where the fan will go through there. And it'll just make the radiator sit up a little higher, and we've mocked that up, and there's like, I don't know, almost a foot of room from the top of this to the hood. So there's no problem at all with the radiator just coming up that much. So that pretty much tells us where we are right now. Put the battery box on just to see that was going to fit. And we're getting ready to pull the cab back off so I can find out what holes I need to leave in here and what holes I can fill up and make the firewall to where it's not so much Swiss cheese. So thanks for tuning in. We'll give you another update as soon as something happens.